Nintendo have recently confirmed that a brand new console is soon to be released. A company statement confirmed that Nintendo expect to announce their new console by the end of their fiscal year, March 2025. And so, we're probably in the final 12 months of the Nintendo Switch's lifecycle as the current gen Nintendo gaming console. So far, we don't know exactly what this console will be or what release games it might feature, but in this video, we're going to put some pieces together and figure out what all this means for the future of Pokemon. Before we get into it, I just wanted to thank all the channel members. We just recently surpassed 30 members, so a huge thank you to everybody on screen. You guys will be able to use the brand new emojis that we've just had custom made in chat and comments, along with all the other perks. Thank you, love you, you guys are the best. The new console has been described as the successor to the Switch. The wording of this does give us some clues about the new system. In Nintendo's history as console developers, we've seen what I would describe as 3 levels of new system launches. The first category would be the minor upgrades. In this category, you'd have the Game Boy to the Game Boy Color, the Game Boy Advance to the Game Boy Advance SP, the DS to the DSi, and the Switch to the Switch OLED. Effectively, these new consoles are Nintendo optimizing an existing console. Essentially, the generation hasn't changed, and you still use the same game cartridges as the previous console model, but games, especially newer games released after the upgrade, might look and perform better for an overall improved experience. Let's call this level 1. Next, you have level 2. This would be the Game Boy Color to the Game Boy Advance, the DS to the 3DS, and the Wii to the Wii U. These are actually brand new consoles that go a bit further than the previous category. There may be some backwards compatibility with the previous console, but these systems were a bespoke new generation of consoles that developers had to adapt to. However, they still retained the branding and core concept of the previous system. It's just that the upgrades were a lot more severe than the previous category in terms of power, functionality, gimmicks, and performance. And finally, level 3. This would be a completely new system that retains none of the branding of the previous system. The Game Boy Advance to the DS, the N64 to the GameCube, the GameCube to the Wii, and the Wii U/3DS to the Switch. This level of console transition doesn't guarantee backwards compatibility and signals that Nintendo are moving away from a system for an entirely new concept. So what level do I think this new Switch successor is going to be? Well, I think we have good reason to believe that this is going to be a level 2. The Nintendo Switch has already hosted 5 main series Pokemon games and some really successful Pokemon spin-off titles. That's way more than any other console in history, and for good reason. It's been Nintendo's second most successful console ever, narrowly after the DS, and it's the 3rd best-selling console of all time. That's impressive when you look at how many amazing systems there have been in the history of gaming. So why fix what isn't broken? Typically, a game console's lifespan as the current gen console will last somewhere around 7 or 8 years. And with the Switch being released in 2017, we're about there. So timing wise, this definitely makes sense. However, I wouldn't say there's any real Switch fatigue in terms of the system concept. The hybrid format is such a unique concept, and the Switch branding is so strong that I don't think this new successor needs to be a level 3 or something brand new. It can be what the 3DS was to the DS, for example. And that notion has been backed up by a lot of rumours. Allegedly, the new Switch will have 4K docked resolution using scaling technology, 1080p handhold resolution, upgrading from the Switch and Switch OLED's 720p, improved frame rate, improved battery life, magnetic Joy-Cons, and that seems to be about it. I think we're all just praying that there's no Joy-Con drift issue this time around. 4K Nintendo games sound amazing, and that's about the biggest major difference this new Switch is likely to have. Though I'm sure they'll also include 1 or 2 other cool new features. But what does this mean for Pokemon? Well, it's pretty much entirely good news. With the system's new power, we're going to see better graphics. 4K Pokemon. After Scarlet and Violet's mostly awful visuals, that will be a hugely welcome addition to the franchise. Scarlet and Violet moved the franchise on with the size and scale of its map and the fact it was a much more open environment. Pokemon have done 5 3D main series games now, but only Legends Arceus and Scarlet and Violet have really made an attempt to be less linear and start to build a more open and interactive world, creating a more unique experience for each individual player's save file. But they have nowhere near perfected that, and this upcoming era of Pokemon games will need to move that concept on even further. and not let the visuals suffer as a result. And it certainly looks like the power of the new system may allow that. Legends ZA will most likely be a release title for the new system, and probably will have a base Switch version as well. So whilst I think this game will take strides forward with the open worldness, I don't think we're going to see groundbreaking strides in that game, fully utilising the new system's capabilities. But I do think it will look a lot better than anything we've seen in the franchise, and utilise the whole concept of harmony between people and Pokemon that was teased in the trailers, expanding on the Synchro Machine functionality for example, and enabling us to control people and Pokemon in 4K. But I do think during the Switch 2 era we are going to see Kanto, Johto and Unova in 4K with reimagined 3D maps, like how Legends Arceus reimagined a tile-based handheld made Sinnoh, but with even more features. Pokemon have been trialling some cool stuff lately, and if we can even get new games where the Pokemon look and behave like they do in Pokemon Snap for example, I think fans will be absolutely delighted. 4K after all should mean a more cinematic look and attention to 3D detail. Pokemon have had some really cool isolated cutscenes in recent games. A few nostalgic ones in Let's Go, the Eternatus battle in Sword and Shield, the Giratina one in Legends, the Sada and Turo one in Gen 9 to name a few. But in future games, I would hope to see these more frequently throughout the story and more cinematic looking stuff actually in the environment as you play through. And I really hope that Pokemon experiments with voice acting as well. If not in the main series, then maybe in a reboot of the Colosseum sub-series, in Legends even, or in a new project. Then they can gauge how people actually feel about a big decision like that, and whether or not to include it in the main series in new generations thereafter. I also think the main character design has been going pretty much downhill since Black and White, and I'd like to see the main characters look a little bit cooler. Please let me wear my hat backwards. Finally, with the fact that the Switch branding is being retained, it means that they can continue to develop the Classics library. And with some inventiveness around the remote stroke hardware situation, maybe even a Wii and Wii U app to the legacy systems. This would enable a bunch of beloved spin-off games to be played on the new console. And something that a lot of people have been asking for, the ability to play legacy main series games on the Switch, from Red and Blue through to Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. And they could be smart about this from a business perspective, spacing out each launch through time and creating hype around them. Or better still, nodding to the amazing Pokemon modding community by adding things like randomizer modes and difficulty settings into old games. It would be fairly easy to do. I'd also like to see them tap into the Octopath Traveler 2 graphic style for something, because I think that style could work really well. I'm just not entirely sure what for yet. But I really think the classics will eventually come to the new system in some form, and whilst I've seen some people saying that it should have already happened, I think I know why it hasn't. Back in March 2023, Nintendo shut down the 3DS eShop and, soon after, shut down pretty much all of the system's online servers. On the 3DS, all of the Gen 1 and 2 Pokemon games were available to purchase, and the fact it was shutting down will have led to a lot of last-minute purchases of those Gen 1 and 2 games, as there had been no announced plans to bring them to the Switch at that point. Imagine the backlash and accusations of cash grabbing that Nintendo would have received if then just a few weeks or months later, they released those same games on the Switch without any warning. So they'll know that they have to wait a fair amount of time. I'd say at least another year or so from now before that angle becomes a little bit more acceptable, because those people who panic bought the 3DS versions will have had sufficient time to play those games without feeling scammed. Now, of course, there could be other reasons why this hasn't happened yet, but this is my working assumption at least. So in conclusion, the Switch 2 could be the ultimate hub for Pokemon gaming, and I really think we're going to see many great Pokemon titles in the new era that take the franchise forward even further. Let me know if I've missed anything and leave all of your thoughts down below. Thank you again to all of the new members of the Galarian gang, and I hope to see you guys using the new emojis in a Poké Rogue or Radical Red stream very soon. Until next time, love you gang.